The date is 2/21/78. The time is 15:20 hours. This will be an interview with Elizabeth Kloepfer, Kloepfer. Those present at the interview are Manus, Manus, M. Milligan, Milligan, Major Nick Mackey, and Detective Robert Keppel. Are you aware that this interview is being taped?
Yes.
Is it taped with your approval?
Yes.
Okay. Would you begin on February 16th, 78 at about 5 a.m. on Thursday and describe a telephone call that you received from Ted Bundy?
Okay, it was 5 p.m. on Thursday.
5 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay.
And he called collect. My daughter accepted the charges. I told him that he shouldn't be calling me, that my phone had a trap on it, and he said that he was in custody. And I asked him where, and he said Florida. And later in the conversation, he repeated over and over again that this was really going to be bad when it broke, that it was not going to break until tomorrow morning and be in the press, but it was going to be really ugly. And I asked him if he was referring to the murders of some sorority girls in Florida, and he said that he wouldn't talk about it, and I told him that I had asked an FBI agent about those murders up here because I was concerned about them, and he didn't want to talk about it. And later in the conversation, he told me that he wished that we could sit down and talk about things without anyone listening, about why he was the way he is. And I said, "Are you telling me that you're sick?" And he said he was really defensive, and he told me to back off, and that what he was referring to was how come he had hurt me so many times.
Did you ask him any specific questions?
I asked him how I was taken into custody. Not that night, he did the next night.
Okay.
We talked for about an hour on Thursday, and then he was going to hang up and call his mother and call back. And when he called back, we didn't accept charges. And then we took the phone off the hook. Then Saturday morning at 2, he called again, collect. And he said that he wanted to talk about what we'd been talking about in the first phone call. And I said, "You mean about being sick?" And he said, "Yes." And he said that he was going to try to clear things up in a way that he could be back in Washington close to his family. That I can't remember exactly how he got into talking about the crimes. He told me that he was sick and that he was consumed by something that he didn't understand, and that it...
Why he couldn't contain it?
Well, he said that he tried. He said that it took so much of his time, that's why he wasn't doing well in law school, and that he couldn't seem to get his act together is because he spent so much time trying to maintain a normal life, and he just couldn't do it. He said that he was preoccupied with his force. He told me that I asked him if I somehow played a part in what had happened, and he said no, that for years before he even met me, he'd been fighting the same sickness, and that when it broke, we just happened to be together. He mentioned an incident about following a sorority girl. He didn't do anything that night, but he just told me that's how it was, that he was out late at night and he would follow people like that. But that he'd try not to, but he just did it anyway.
Did he mention anything to do with sorority girls at the University of Washington?
Well, this incident did take place on campus, where he just followed this girl. He didn't talk about the girl that was abducted from there. He did talk about Lake Sammamish. She told me that he started by saying he was sick, and he said, "I don't have a split personality," and he said, "I don't have blackouts." He said, "I remember everything I've done." And he mentioned the day, July 14th, when 2 women were abducted from Lake Sammamish, and we went out to eat that night about 5, and he was saying that he remembered that he ate 2 hamburgers and that he enjoyed every bite of it. and that we went to Farrell's after, and he said that it wasn't that he'd forgotten what he had done that day, or that he didn't remember, but just that it was over.
The incident was over?
Yeah. That's the implication I got.
Did he mention the incident specifically?
Yes.
What did he say?
He just mentioned the day.
He just mentioned July 14th?
He said the day of Lake Sammamish.
The day of Lake Sammamish is what he said?
Mm-hmm.
Did he specifically say that he had done something with some women on that day?
No, I knew what he was talking about, and he knew that I knew it, so we didn't relay any.
Okay.
He said he would answer any questions he could, and I asked him about the night that Brenda Ball disappeared, because he'd been with me and my family, and he left early in the evening, and then the next day was late to my daughter's baptism, and I asked him if that's where he'd been. And he mumbled something, and I couldn't understand the answer, and then he said, "It's pretty scary, isn't it?" And I said, "Yes." I asked him if he'd ever tried to kill me, and he told me at one incident that he did.
What was that?
Oh, I used to sleep on a hide-a-bed by the fireplace in the living room, and he closed the damper. I was drunk that night, and he closed the damper, and he put towels under the door, and then he left. And he told me that he'd been really trying hard to control this sickness, and that he'd been staying off the streets and trying to be normal, and that it just happened that I was there when he felt it coming on, and that he wanted to kill me that night.
What steps did he take to either attempt to kill you or not to kill you?
Well, he just was going to let me die of smoke inhalation, I guess. He did tell me, I woke up briefly, and he said, "I'm going to go home and get my fan. The fireplace is backed up." And he left, and he didn't come back.
Do you recall what night that was, period of time?
I think it was in the fall of '73.
The fall of '73.
I think so.
Did he mention the specific time that he coordinate with you, the time of your meeting to any of this starting, or had it started prior to meeting him?
Well, I asked him, I told him that the police were talking about murders that had happened since 1969, and I said, that's the year that we met each other. And I asked him what I had to do with this whole thing, and he said nothing, that he had been trying to control it for years, and that we just happened to be together when it got the best of him. I told him when we were talking about the year 1969 being the starting date, he said that the police were years off. And he talked about, I believe he said that during 71, 72, and 73, it was taking up more and more of his time that he should have been using for other things. He told me it wasn't me, that it was him that was sick. It wasn't anything I'd done. I asked him, I mentioned that there was a phone call that he made to me from Salt Lake City when a woman down there was abducted, and it was late at night, and I've always thought, well, he couldn't be out abducting women, because I'd talked to him on the phone that night, and I asked him if he didn't sometimes call me or come over to touch base with reality after he'd done some of these things, and he said that's a pretty good guess.
Did he mention any other specific cases besides Brenda Ball and Lake Sammamish? Like, did he mention Central Washington State College, Ellensburg, Oregon State University girl?
No.
Did any other missing girls' deaths come up other than those two?
No.
Did he mention anything with Utah or Colorado?
No. He alluded to Tallahassee. I asked him specifically about the Florida murders, and he told me that he didn't want to talk about them. But then, in the same conversation, he said that he felt like he had a disease like alcoholism, like the alcoholic that couldn't take another drink. And he felt like, he told me there was just something he couldn't be around, and he knew it now. And I asked him what that was, and he said, please don't make me say it.
Is there any other questions that you asked him on the Saturday conversation?
Not that I can remember.
Can you think of anything else that she hasn't covered?
That's about it. But she repeated everything over again after he had said something to her. Then she said, "You said this. You had like some memories. You remember eating hamburgers. You remember they taste good." And then it went on to the other girl at South Seattle. I'm talking about that.
Did he mention at all anything like, I recall you saying before that he had changed either a ski rack or a bicycle rack from his car to your car. Did he mention anything about that?
No.
And he really didn't say anything specific, like mention any names of girls. You were the one that mentioned the names,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like
That's
Brenda
right.
Ball. He just brought up Lake Sammamish, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of anything else that she's covered before? This interview will be ended at 15:33 hours.